March 25th, 2026 is the International Day of Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery. The one day a year the world sets aside specifically to honor the millions of Africans who were kidnapped, chained, and shipped across the ocean. And on that day, that exact day, the United States of America walked into the United Nations and voted no. Not abstained, no. 123 countries stood up and said the transatlantic slave trade was the gravest crime against humanity in recorded history. 3 countries said no: America, Argentina, Israel. That is the company this nation chose to keep on the International Day of Remembrance for Slavery Victims. Let that sit. Researchers have already calculated exactly what is owed: between $14 and $26 trillion. Not millions, trillions. America has paid reparations to Japanese Americans, paid native tribes. Germany is still writing checks to Holocaust survivors right now in 2026. But when it comes to Black people, this country has been running the same play for over 160 years. New decade, new spokesman, same answer, same excuse, same result. Today, we are going through every single one of those excuses. The 1865 version, the 1989 version, the 2019 version, and the version they just delivered at the United Nations this week. Because this is not a new story. It is the same story on a loop. And every time you hear the next excuse, I want you to feel exactly what it is: a choice. A deliberate, documented, repeated choice to protect the money and deny the debt. That should not just make you sad. That should make you furious. Let us start with the moment itself. March 25th, 2026 is the International Day of Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery. That is the day the UN General Assembly chose to pass Resolution A/80/L.48. Ghana's President John Mahama stood up and led this vote on behalf of the entire 54-member African group. He talked about the millions of Africans who were kidnapped, chained, and shipped across the ocean to build wealth for other people. The final count was 123 yes votes, 3 no votes, and 52 abstentions. Mostly European countries sitting on their hands. But America did not sit on its hands. America raised its hand and said no. That same day, there was a wreath ceremony at the African Burial Ground National Monument in New York City. Hundreds of years ago, enslaved Black people were buried in that ground because they were not allowed to be buried anywhere else. The world was paying respect, and America was across town voting against their humanity. The man who cast that no vote was U.S. Deputy Ambassador Dan Negrea, and he did not hide behind silence. He went on record. He said, and I want you to hear this clearly, the United States does not recognize a legal right to reparations for historical wrongs that were not illegal under international law at the time they occurred. Translation: we stole from you legally, so we owe you nothing. That is the official position of the United States government. Not in 1865, right now, in 2026. That is not a slip. That is not one bad diplomat. That is policy. And it is a policy with a history longer and more deliberate than most people know. Here is the playbook. Pay attention to how consistent this is. Slavery was legal at the time, so we owe nothing. That was Andrew Johnson's position in 1865 when he took the land back from 40,000 Black families and handed it to the Confederates. That was 150 years ago. None of us alive are responsible. That was Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell. On record, in 2019. We already handled it. The Civil War, the Civil Rights Movement. That was the unofficial position of every Congress that let H.R. 40 sit in a drawer for 36 years without a single floor vote. We don't recognize reparations liability for acts that weren't illegal under international law at the time. That was Dan Negrea at the United Nations this week. Different decade, different face, same answer. Every single version of that excuse has one purpose: protect the money. And we are going to walk through exactly how much money that is, and exactly who else got paid while Black people kept getting told to wait. Because here's what they do not teach you in school. The promise was made. It was real. It was on paper. January 16, 1865, Union General William Tecumseh Sherman issues Special Field Orders No. 15. 400,000 acres of land along the South Carolina and Georgia coast, divided into 40-acre plots for 40,000 black families who had just been freed. That is where 40 acres and a mule comes from. It was not a rumor. It was a military order signed during the final weeks of the Civil War. Black families moved onto that land. They started building. Some of them had never owned anything in their lives, and now they had land under their feet. That lasted about 4 months. President Abraham Lincoln was killed in April 1865. Andrew Johnson took over. And Johnson, who openly believed black people were inferior, reversed Sherman's order. He gave every single acre back to the Confederates. The people who had just fought a war to keep black people enslaved got their land back. The people who had been enslaved got nothing. 400,000 acres, gone. That was the original betrayal, and everything that comes after it, every broken promise, every blocked bill, every no vote at the United Nations, it all leads back to that moment in 1865 when America chose the Confederates over the freed. Now here is where the full picture starts to get even bigger than one broken promise. Hold that thought for a second, because this is exactly the kind of story they want buried. Hey family, real talk. YouTube has shut down channels for telling exactly these kinds of stories, so I need you to find us off this platform. Go to blackstories-untold.com, join our mailing list, and make sure we stay connected no matter what they do. Now back to what happened. After 1865, Black Americans spent the next century surviving terror, legal segregation, and economic theft, with no land, no capital, and no apology. Reconstruction came and was crushed. Jim Crow came and lasted nearly 100 years, and through all of it, the idea of reparations, of actually paying back what was stolen, was treated like a crazy, radical demand. So in 1989, a congressman from Michigan named John Conyers decided to do something modest. He introduced H.R. 40, that is, House Resolution 40, named after the 40 acres that were promised and stolen. The bill did not demand reparations. It did not demand a single dollar. It simply asked Congress to form a commission to study what happened during slavery and what the effects might be today. That is it. Study it. Just look at it. John Conyers introduced that bill every single session of Congress from 1989 until he retired in 2017. Every year, for 28 years. It never even got a hearing. When Conyers left, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee picked it up and kept pushing. In 2019, H.R. 40 finally got its first congressional hearing in decades. Writer Ta-Nehisi Coates sat in front of Congress and testified. He talked about what was stolen. He talked about the wealth gap. He talked about what this country built on black labor and black pain. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell was asked about it that same year. He said on record that he opposed reparations because, and I want you to hear this, we had tried to deal with it through the Civil War and through passage of civil rights legislation. And, he added, none of us currently living are responsible for what happened 150 years ago. That was 2019. That is the same logic Dan Negrea used at the UN in 2026. They have been reading from the same script for decades. In 2021, H.R. 40 cleared a committee for the first time in 32 years. People thought something was finally moving. It never got a floor vote. It has been blocked at every turn. And this is where everything connects. While Congress was blocking a bill to even study the question, economists were already running the numbers. Thomas Kramer at the University of Connecticut published his calculation in the Social Science Quarterly. He put the figure at $20 trillion in today's money. That accounts for the unpaid labor of enslaved people over roughly 2.5 centuries, compounded over time. The Brattle Group, a legal research firm, published their own analysis in July 2023. They came in at $26 trillion for U.S.-specific liability. Duke University economist William Sandy Darity calculated between $13 and $14 trillion as the amount needed just to close the current racial wealth gap. 3 different methodologies, 3 different research teams, all landing between $13 and $26 trillion. That is not a fringe theory. That is peer-reviewed economic research. And America's answer is still no. Now let us talk about the part that exposes this whole thing as a choice. Because America does pay reparations, just not the black people. In 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act. That law paid $20,000 per person to Japanese Americans who had been locked in internment camps during World War II. Over 82,000 people received checks. The total payout was $1.6 billion. Reagan signed it. Congress passed it. No one called it crazy or radical. It was just the right thing to do. The Obama administration paid out more than $3.3 billion in federal trust settlements to Native American tribes. Paid. Done. And Germany has been paying Holocaust survivors since 1952 under the Luxembourg Agreement. By 2021, Germany had paid out roughly $100 billion total. In 2024 alone, Germany paid $1.4 billion to 128,000 survivors. Germany keeps paying because Germany understands that what happened was a crime. America cannot even admit that slavery was wrong under international law. The pattern is not complicated. When the victims are not black, America pays. When the victims are black, America votes no at the United Nations. And it does not stop at the vote. The erasure is happening right now, in real time, and it started exactly 1 year before the UN vote. On March 27, 2025, 1 year to the day before America voted no in Geneva, President Trump signed Executive Order 14253, titled Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History. That order targeted the National Museum of African American History and Culture. The one museum in this country built specifically to document what black people survived and built and achieved. They went after it directly. And that was not the first move. On January 20th, 2025, his first day back in office, Trump signed an executive order eliminating all federal diversity programs across the entire government. Think about what that combination means. You eliminate the programs that tried to correct the inequality. Then you target the museum that documents why the inequality exists. Then 1 year later, you vote no at the United Nations when the world tries to call slavery what it was. That is not a coincidence. That is a strategy. And the strategy has been the same since Andrew Johnson gave the land back to the Confederates in 1865. Deny what happened. Block every attempt to fix it. Erase every record of it. And when the world asks you to simply acknowledge it, say no. This is why the UN vote matters beyond the vote itself. Because when Dan Negrea stood up on March 25th, 2026, and said America does not recognize reparations liability, he was not making a new argument. He was reading from a playbook that is more than 160 years old. The theft was real. The numbers are documented. The precedents for payment exist. Every other group got some form of acknowledgement. Black people in America get a blocked bill, a targeted museum, and a no vote on the International Day of Remembrance. Ayanna Pressley reintroduced H.R. 40 in February 2025 in the 119th Congress. As of this vote, it is still waiting, still sitting, still blocked. 36 years and counting. Here is the truth they cannot erase no matter how many executive orders they sign. Scholars have calculated the debt. The world has named the crime. 123 countries stood up and said it out loud. 3 said no. And one of them was supposed to be the land of the free. The fight for reparations is not about charity. It is not about handouts. It is about a debt that was calculated, documented, and proven, and a government that keeps choosing to look away. But we are not looking away. We never did. This was Black Stories Untold, and as always, thanks for watching. If you want more